I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Michael Jansen, Chief Research Officer, guides the practice's research agenda and architecture by leveraging his extensive experience to identify and unlock emerging trends. Sarah Burnett, Executive Vice President and Distinguished Analyst, sets up and leads Everest Group's Service Optimization Technologies Research Program, which focuses on intelligent process automation and optimization using technologies such as artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. Ambardeep Modi, Practice Director, is also a part of the Service Optimization Technologies Research Program and leads research related to robotic process automation, intelligent automation, and process mining. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Michael. Take it away, Michael.
All right, thank you, Lucy. And I'm Michael Jansen, and I'm calling in from just north of Dallas. And we got a great topic today, dealing with my colleagues across the globe here. As we look into the sections we're going to cover, we're going to talk a little bit about the marketplace, and Sarah and I are going to have a brief chat about that. And then we're going to get into our Pinnacle study, which is really focused in on the intelligent automation. So it's something we've been working on for a little while, and we have some great results and want to show you what those look like. So let's take it away from there. So Sarah, I wanted to start out with a conversation around, let's just define what we're talking about. There's a lot of components to RPA and intelligent automation. Can you give us the lowdown on how you see it and how folks should be thinking about it?
Sure, Michael, and hello, ladies and gentlemen. We've tried to encapsulate what we mean by intelligent automation on this slide. As you can see here, it's a number of different components that contribute to intelligent automation. This is really Everest Group's description of what it is. So the core components are those that are on the left side of the slide. These include intelligent document processing, IDP. You'll hear us talk about IDP, unattended robotic process automation, which is RPA, desktop automation. You may have heard the term RDA or attended RPA, and intelligent virtual agents. Those are really the core parts of intelligent automation, but they do draw upon the technologies that are also shown on this slide on the right side of it. For example, something like an intelligent virtual agent might call onto cognitive services that are provided by a larger platform. The same with intelligent document processing. So we've put in those core parts of AI itself, like cognitive services, NLP, ML, and so on. Increasingly, we are seeing business process management, and in particular workflow and orchestration, come into play as enterprises try and pass parts of processes back and forth between machines and humans and back, and from machine to machine and so on. So it's being able to control the flow of a complicated process. Then at the top there on the right, we have analytics. This, of course, itself comes in many different guises. There is analytics for operations, so operational data, process data, what's going on in the process, and not to forget, of course, the value that the transactions that are being processed carry, so the data that they carry, the business intelligence side of it as well. So it's really a very broad set of technologies that make up intelligent automation, and actually I think this will grow, this will expand over time as well. So having this defined what intelligent automation is, let's look at how the market is evolving. Let's look at the evolution of automation. Here you'll see that we've created a hockey stick chart. This is how we think the market is and where it will head. And it's more really in terms of advances in automation versus the business impact that organizations are able to achieve. So early on, we had robotic desktop automation, largely designed to help contact center agents. That then evolved into what we now call robotic process automation, where you were doing similar kind of thing, going through the user interface, automating processes that way. But with robotic process automation, the focus was very much on running things in the back in the data center, and running according to schedules, and sometimes real time as well, robots polling particular queues for activities and being able to handle them straight away as they came in. And of course, we're somewhere between RPA and intelligent automation. That's how we've marked it, and that's largely because adoption of solutions such as IDP and IVA haven't yet got to the sort of level where we expect organizations will achieve huge business outcomes and of course achieve scale in terms of automation as well. So Michael, I hope that answers your initial question anyway.
Yes, it does. And then the next slide, we're going to get into some of the numbers. And I look at these almost explosive growth rates here. And I know you and I go back and forth with your team on, is this real or not real?
Yes, sure. So we research this in very great detail because there's a lot of hype in the market, and there are other estimates that are much bigger than ours. So this is the conservative estimate, really, because we're looking at license sales mostly. But the market is really growing extremely fast. Overall, I reckon it's about 3.8 billion. So if we put these three markets together, and the components here, the biggest contributor to that size is RPA, which is at around 2 billion and growing at about 75%. Then we have the intelligent document processing market. This is really growing on the back of people's familiarity with RPA, I believe, because they are actually learning how to codify their processes and then how to apply other technologies that they've maybe never used before. So that is also growing. That's at about a billion, 1.5 billion. Then we go on to the intelligent virtual agents market, which is still relatively nascent. It's I guess it's coming mostly through the consumer market because of all the home devices that everybody has. We haven't got so good at using it in the enterprise yet, using this technology. But again, that's growing significantly, 40 to 43%. I expect as time goes by, we'll get better at it, at understanding how we can use it in the enterprise. I mean, there's already the chatbot and the front line of customer contact management that is the ideal place for this kind of technology to be used. But I reckon there's a lot more that we could do with IVA.
So Sarah, if you bring those valuations and you see how explosive the marketplace is, let's talk about where the value is being created at. And on the next slide, what you're going to see here is really kind of our stack of different value components. So at the very basic level, you have cost savings, and there is always going to be an element of cost savings in any of these kind of digital projects where people are looking to, hey, how can I take some money to the bottom line? But the real value that we're seeing and hearing from clients in the actual implementations is more in the operating layer in the middle. So getting more efficient, improving the quality, the overall experience from employees and how they do their work, and the way that work is managed. That's where the bulk of the value is now. Now, we did this study about a year, or just over a year, almost 2 years ago, I guess it would have been. And there's another component on the top, which is really kind of focused on the business impact. And we saw very little of this. We saw just a couple instances of this showing up here, but we are increasingly seeing more opportunities, and you'll see some of this as we go through the deck, where clients are now focusing on how this can help their overall customer experience and also improve the digital transformation agenda too. So those are components we're looking forward to seeing more of. But the real sweet spot right now is in that operational middle ground. So let's do a quick poll here, and we want to get your perspective on the drivers between your implementations and your organizations. So we've given you 5 choices. One is around cost savings, one is around that operational efficiency, one is around employee productivity, the customer experience, and one get out of jail free card says, yeah, and I haven't done it yet. So let's look at the results right now. And okay, we've got just About a third of the people have voted. Okay, getting close to 50. Okay, now we just went past 50%. And pretty much, okay, so Peter, give another 5 seconds here. All right, let's close out the poll here. And probably no surprise here, that operational efficiency and quality is what you guys are saying as well. So certainly a component of cost savings, always going to be important, but really focusing on that. And there's an increasing number on that top level, that enhancing the customer experience, disrupting competition and top line. So that's good to see that one growing as well. So Sarah, any thoughts on that one?
Yes, I think that is sort of shows the increasing maturity of the market. I bet you if we do this next year, the enhancing customer experience and increasing employee productivity will be higher rated as well. I think we started with cost savings being very important, but it's actually expanding into other drivers now.
Yeah, which will allow the industry to continue to grow. If value's there, then the industry will grow accordingly.
Sure.
So let's get into our study here. And on the next slide here, what you're going to see is what we call our dot plot slide. And on this, each dot represents somebody that participated in the study. So these are all enterprise comparisons. So there's no vendor or service providers in this mix. This is all comparing consumers of services. And so what we ask a number of questions around capability, and you'll see 5 different categories that Amar and I are going to talk about as we go through the deck. But those things, the scores are aggregated to create an x-axis. And on the y-axis, we see the outcomes. So we're looking at those same things. The categories in general are cost, operational, and business impact. We've aggregated all those scores and plotted those out here. Now, if you go back to your basic statistics class back in college, you could easily imagine a regression line that goes from the bottom left, clusters all the dots going to the upper right. And what you'll see there is there's almost no dots in the upper left. There's a straggler that's kind of close up there. And that's good from an analytical standpoint. So what that basically says is if you have really basic capabilities, you're not going to get the higher level of outcomes. And you don't see any dots in the bottom right either. So what we're looking at there is you got folks that if they do put additional capabilities, they do get proportional amounts of increased outcomes. And the goal here in this analysis was to show you the cause and effect relationship between things you can do to the expected business outcomes you're going to get. And so we take all those scores, and then what we're going to do in a lot of this analysis, we're going to show you the comparison for those enterprises in the upper right. We label them Pinnacle Enterprises, and those are going to be compared to everybody else. So what we want to understand is what those organizations are doing differently and why they get the outcomes they do. So, okay, Mara, you and I are gonna go through this, and we got a way we're gonna present it is in 3 components: the convictions, provocations, and controversies. So the convictions are things that we feel very strong about. We believe the data is absolute, and there's really not a lot of controversy, but we want to show this to you. Then we're going to take it down to a series of provocations. These are ideas that are where we think things are going, and what we see in the marketplace. But there may be some interesting other views that may come into play here. We've labeled them as value creation ideas. And then we have some, at the very end, we have some controversies. And these things are, I would refer to as emerging hypotheses. These are things that Sarah and her team, and Amar, and the rest of the team there are going to be looking at over the next 12 to 24 months to see if those things come to pass. So with that, let's get into the data. So the first 5 of those convictions here, I'm not going to go through them here. We're going to take each one section by section, and Amar's going to cover a lot of the content that goes behind that. So on the first conviction, we have enterprises maturity has increased significantly over the past 18 months. And so this is what I was referencing. We had done a study just about 2 years ago now, and we're going to compare the results and talk about what's changed. So Amar?
Sure, Michael. Hi, everyone. So if you look at this slide, so we classify intelligent automation capabilities into 5 key dimensions, and the change, if we compare how the maturity has evolved over the last 8 months, we see that the change is evident across all these automation capability dimensions. So in terms of vision and strategy, more enterprises are looking beyond cost savings and operational efficiencies to focus on strategic benefits such as superior customer experience, top-line growth, and shorter time to market for driving intelligent automation initiatives. On an average, the scale of intelligent automation deployments has become 3 times as large in a span of 18 months. Almost all enterprises now have an automation center of excellence, and the number of enterprises that have advanced to a more mature hub and spoke automation center of excellence model almost doubled over the past 18 months. In terms of technology capability, a significantly higher number of enterprises have deployed AI-based automation technologies in addition to RPA, and those leveraging ancillary technologies such as business process management or process orchestrator, analytics, and process mining technologies have also increased to more than double. The last but not the least automation capability dimension, that is talent management. So on that front, we see that enterprises have been able to achieve a greater success in upskilling and reskilling their employees due to higher focus and investments in establishing automation training programs and enabling higher employee engagement. Now, if we go to the next slide, what we see is that best-in-class or Pinnacle Enterprises are ahead of the other enterprises in terms of scale, scope, and speed of deployments. Pinnacle Enterprises have over 250 automation use cases in production, which is a huge number on an average, and about 2.5 times the number of use cases deployed by other enterprises. And they have achieved that by deploying automations at a 2 times faster pace and by scaling their automation initiatives across a larger number of business functions within the organization. Michael, any thoughts on this?
No, I think it's it's indicative of what we've been hearing and seeing out there, that we get a significant uptick in the execution side. So I think we'll continue to see this. Some organizations have struggled to get the to keep the scale going, but I think as we get more mature in our execution, these numbers will just only go up.
Yeah. Okay.
So the next one we're going to talk about is the operational impact. So that was something that was the #1 on the quick poll there. We want to show you some of those actual numbers that we found from the participants.
Yeah. So when we look at this chart, we see good news and great news, which Michael often talk about when he talks about this slide. And on average, other enterprises have been able to realize almost 50% improvement due to intelligent automation over pre-automation scenario over a wide range of operational metrics, such as reducing cycle time, improving the staff productivity, and improving process accuracy. And this is quite a significant improvement in itself, and hence good news. And the great news is what Pinnacle Enterprises have been able to achieve, and as we can clearly see, they are further ahead with over 65% improvement on average over these operational metrics.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it's really important when you look at that, and you talk about good news and great news. And I love that line on this kind of research. And those are not insignificant. I mean, those are dramatic improvements. This is not like, well, a few people figured this out. It's largely that most organizations are able to see this kind of improvement. And yes, there's a few people that are doing it better, but there's nobody really doing reporting any absolute failures or things like that in this. And I'm sure there's some projects that don't go quite the way they want to, but on a whole, we're seeing really good news here. So if we move to the next conversation, and Amar, you mentioned earlier the hub and spoke COE. I remember when we did the survey, just over 2 years, or just about 2 years ago, we talked about, did you have a COE for automation? And now the question is, that's not the question anymore. The question has moved beyond that.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at the next slide, we'll see that almost all Pinnacle Enterprises have a hub and spoke COE model. as compared to only about 25% of other enterprises. And the question has really moved beyond automation COE, having or not having automation COE, is because almost all enterprises, Pinnacle Enterprises or other enterprises participated in this research. They had a dedicated automation COE. So it's really about what is the maturity level of the automation COE that the enterprises have. And we clearly see that Pinnacle Enterprises are ahead with a more mature hub and spoke COE model. And COEs of Pinnacle Enterprises also have a better governance and distribution of roles and responsibilities, while the Pinnacle Enterprises are also ahead in terms of having a robust collaboration between IT and operations teams. The difference between them and other enterprises, as you can see, is not much. And this, we believe, is a result of increased awareness among enterprises on the importance of ensuring collaboration between IT and operations. Pinnacle Enterprises are ahead in better defining the roles and responsibilities of the automation COE, as you can see in the chart below. And this is across the automation life cycle. And when we look at the next slide, we see that it naturally extends to more advanced resourcing and talent management practices. All the Pinnacle Enterprises said that they share and pool resources as compared to less than 50% of other enterprises. With a hub and spoke COE model, they are also much ahead of others in terms of following an inclusive approach to automation with organization-wide employee engagement and well-structured automation training programs. And this clearly helps with better change management and achieving enterprise scale.
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the differentiated best practices we've seen between the Pinnacle group and the rest of the folks. I mean, I encourage that anybody that's that's looking at automation to consider these kinds of things, and we're going to show you a few more as we go through here. But big differences in the execution here. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back to Sarah here to talk a little bit about the overall ecosystem. And you had a slide at the very beginning where you kind of explained here the components. Let's talk about that in the context of the actual data we saw.
Yes, sure. Well, I think this slide really encapsulates the findings very well. So first of all, the adoption of AI in addition to RPA has increased significantly, more than 4 times. Adoption of other capabilities such as process orchestrators and BPM components within, in conjunction with RPA has also gone up significantly. So we talked about organizations wanting to get more out of intelligent automation and investing in a broad set of technologies. They're investing in analytics, in chatbots, process mining, and so on. Many enterprises have said to me that they've automated a few processes, but they don't really know what to do next. And that's where this kind of interest in process mining, process discovery comes into play. They are finding that the data, the information that they need in order to identify what to automate next. So they can also optimize their processes, which is such an important part of automation altogether. So for end-to-end automation, they don't need robotics alone. They need other capabilities, intelligent document processing, and so on. So really, it just confirms that we are in the age of intelligent automation.
Yeah, Sarah, when I look at this slide and you see something where just in a less than 2-year period here, we go from 17 to 84% into the adoption of AI. That's a huge jump, and it's not just a few percentage points. It's a wholesale change, and I think that's really coming from two angles. Really, is the demand side and the supply side. You want to talk a little bit? I mean, that kind of goes back to your initial conversation, how this stuff's all kind of coming together.
Yes, absolutely. So the technology is advancing all the time. For example, let's take or talk about IVA, the intelligent virtual agents, they're able to actually offer more. So what we're seeing is the ability to understand some nuances, some utterances, more intense. The technology vendors are actually pre-training some of the IVA for specific capabilities with some awareness of the context within which they're expected to operate. So technology is advancing and it's making it easier for it really to be adopted by enterprises.
Well, and the vendors themselves are changing too, right? So, they're no longer just doing, one trick ponies. They're now becoming multidimensional and being able to deliver that whole suite of things you were talking about. And they do it in context of the customer's industry.
Absolutely, we're seeing the mergers and acquisitions in this space as the vendors try and cover more. So initially they were trying, some of the RPA vendors were trying to basically make RPA, that was the glue that held everything together. But actually the model is changing, and sort of there's almost, although there is integration between packages, they're not necessarily all coupled together. It's a bit of a decoupling going on in the market, for the want of a better word. But yes, absolutely, they are expanding into other areas, and we will see a lot more of that, given what's going on with Microsoft as well, with Microsoft Flow announcements. So it's a very interesting dynamic market at the moment.
So Mar, take us a little deeper into some of the technology aspects.
Yeah, sure. So if you look at the next slide, what we see is that Pinnacle Enterprises are often in the hunt for experimenting with innovative, disruptive technologies. And consequently, they're ahead in adopting more sophisticated intelligent automation technologies and also leveraging them effectively for better outcomes. For example, while other enterprises are not leveraging process mining for basic process discovery, Pinnacle Enterprises are looking to leverage them for process optimization. They're also much ahead of others in adopting solutions integrated with advanced AI, ML, NLP kind of capabilities. So again, just relating back to the point that Michael and Sarah were talking about in terms of maturity, in terms of both demand and supply.
All right, fantastic. So let's go on to the final conviction here, and let's talk about the robots are coming, and they're going to replace all the humans. And talk to us about what that reality looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the enterprises do not really see intelligent automation as a means to reduce headcount, right? And we found that on average, less than 20% of the employees who were impacted due to intelligent automation were laid off. That means more than 80% were really redeployed, reskilled, or upskilled to do higher value work. And reports in media around massive job losses due to automation are highly exaggerated as we see it when we look at the data, actual data from the enterprises who have actually adopted intelligent automation. And some of these media reports around massive job losses are actually leading to negative sentiments and distractions. On the contrary, we find that intelligent automation is helping enterprises enhance employee experience and engagement, as well as offer better career paths and incentives to their employees. Investing in talent upskilling or reskilling is also becoming a necessity for enterprises to address the talent needs of the future. If we look at the next slide,
yeah, Amar, before we go to the next slide, I want to. There's a lot of questions here, and I want to try to pick off one or two along the way. And this is related to the conversation around hub and spokes. And what's the activity do you see in the spokes versus the hub? Do you have any ideas on that? You can give us real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we see is that the hubs of this kind of a hub and spoke center of excellence models are focused on filtering the use cases and setting the governance rules based on which all these spokes are governed. So these spokes are basically set up within individual business units or individual geographies, which have their own set of specific requirements, and they kind of tweak some of those governance set by the central hub based on some specific regulatory or geography specific requirements that are there, or certain limitations that are there. But it's really about collaboration between the hubs who kind of set those principles, those governance rules in terms of how the automation use cases are identified, and really empower all the spokes with the tools and technologies and the best set of best practices to go about identifying the use cases and delivering automation. And these spokes really are the ones who are looking at specific business unit requirements or geography requirements and collaborating effectively with the hub to implement those automation use cases. So it's really about kind of bringing collaboration between the hubs, which also comprises of IT and business or operations teams working closely with each other, and the spokes again consisting of business folks within those business units or geographies, and collaborating with their local IT teams to kind of really implement those set of best practices that are set by the central hub.
Okay, thank you. And we've got several pages of questions here, so keep them coming. If we can't get to them along the way, we'll try to get them at the end, or we'll try to respond back after the webinar. So keep them coming, and we'll do our best to answer those as we can. All right. Automation is no longer, so we're moving into the provocations. These are things that we're still thinking about. There may be some controversy here in terms of how where things are going. So Amar, talk to us about the simple rules-based task, and where do we think things are going from here. And Sarah, you're going to join in on this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, if we just recall the slide which Sarah was talking about during the initial part of the presentation, where we see the market maturing towards intelligent automation. I mean, moving beyond RPA and kind of going towards intelligent automation. I think this really ties to that with some more data from the study. So what we see is that enterprises have started looking beyond low-hanging fruits, which are simple rules-based tasks. While Pinnacle Enterprises are ahead and have found greater success in automating complex use cases that deliver higher business value. Pinnacle Enterprises are also following an optimized first approach towards automation, and what that really means is that they are really looking towards eliminating unnecessary steps from the processes, or optimizing the processes, simplifying, re-engineering them, or even defining the future states of the processes before going about automating them. And as you can see from the data that we have here, Pinnacle Enterprises are clearly ahead of other enterprises in terms of following this kind of optimized first approach. But if you look at the general market maturity or at an overall level, we see that in general, enterprises have started to look beyond low-hanging fruit, simple rules-based tasks, and are looking to optimize or make some changes to the business processes before going about automating them.
Yes, I think this is really significant, this slide. I think it shows that Pinnacle Enterprises that have achieved considerably more with automation than others have all really prepared well for automation. They have made significant efforts into understanding what they're doing, how they're doing it, and actually, it makes a lot of sense to me as well, because with process mining, for example, finding that organizations have hundreds, hundreds of versions of the same process. The way that people do the processes are quite different to each other, even when organizations think they've standardized. So which version of the process are you going to be automating? Which is the best one? These are the sort of questions that you need to ask, and that's why you need to find out how a process is being conducted, being undertaken, what is happening, and actually, is there some way that you could do better? For example, with robots, you can do 24/7. You don't have to wait for working hours during the day. You can do 24/7 operations. Is it possible to change things so that you get more done during quieter working hours in the, during the night when, or other times when it's quieter for the enterprise? So it's really important to have a review and understand what it is that you're actually automating.
All right, so let's move on to our next provocation, and this one always gets interesting responses, because there's always, well, is this real in terms of savings? And Michael, you talked a little bit earlier about the operational excellence. Amar was showing you some slides on that, but provocation number 2 is really about show me the money and what's really possible, what a client's really reporting in terms of their actual savings and their break-even points and their return on investments. What are we really seeing there?
Yeah. So again, it's really great to see the kind of return on investment that enterprises have reported that they're achieving from their intelligent automation programs, and this is certainly higher than what they were achieving less than 2 years ago with their RPA deployment. So the net of it is that by implementing more AI and other digital levers as part of their automation initiatives, in addition to RPA, certainly the cost savings and return on investment has improved. Now, if you look at how Pinnacle Enterprises compare to other enterprises, they are again significantly ahead and achieving almost 1.5x the return on investment from their intelligent automation initiatives. And
Hey, do we lose? I think we lost Amar there. Okay, all right. Let me just jump in here. So those savings are real. What I wanted to do is actually the next one is I was going to cover that. So let me go ahead and take it from there.
Sorry.
Amar, we got you back here.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the interruption.
Okay.
So as I was just saying that if you go back to the previous slide, so they're not only able to achieve greater return on investment, but they're also able to break even faster than other enterprises, and on average in about 14 months. And just coming back to the level of cost savings and the use cases where they have deployed intelligent automation, it's a bit provocative to see that Pinnacle Enterprises have been able to achieve on average 60% savings from their intelligent automation initiatives over pre-automation scenario.
All right, great. So let's move on to the last provocation we have here, and that's really the one that I look at and saying, what's the overall potential for this in terms of the business impact. So we've talked about cost savings, we've talked about the operational improvements, but can we really go beyond that? And is this really going to make a difference at the C-suite? And so on the next slide, what we've done here is really start to pull forward some of those conversations. And so let me start us off here, and just the way we've got this set up here is these are the things that we asked to stack rank in terms of improvement. And so, are you seeing improving employee experience, improving customer experience, top line growth, new business models, and reducing time to market? So that's the order that people responded. But what's important here is in the last version of the study we did just about 2 years ago, there was literally almost nobody responding to any of these things in this context. Okay, so they were getting the operational improvements, they were getting some cost savings, but they weren't seeing much strategic impact. And so what we're seeing now is the Pinnacle Enterprises are starting to report on more of those case studies. And Sarah, you had some case studies that you wanted to talk about here that really kind of illustrated what the potential is.
Yes, certainly. So I think in terms of employee experience, you know, we are at the beginnings of enabling employees to do more automation for themselves. So we're seeing that we're at the beginning of that journey, and of course the kind of examples that we are seeing, you know, there's an example of a lady who had a 5-hour process that she had to do fairly frequently, and it took something like 300 clicks, and her organization actually ran a program where they trained their staff to automate their own processes, and she did this, and she's now able to run it in a matter of a few minutes. So obviously freeing up her time, and it was a very tedious process by all accounts as well. But this whole idea of having chatbots, for example, doing some of the sort of first line of support for staff as well when it comes to IT, for example, or HR inquiries, it's all about speeding up, improving employees' experience. In terms of day-to-day work, you know, being able to help agents, for example, know what's the best answer to give, provide guidance on policy as a call is going on, for example, in a contact center, or even for employees actually identifying, you know, where the expertise might lie, you know, something that is possible through collaboration suites and so on, combined with these kinds of intelligent solutions, I think is really important. Improving customer experience, of course, has led to a lot of this development because of this sort of contact center agents, origins of RDA and so on. It's always been top of the mind, but we are getting some phenomenal results now. We're hearing some amazing things like banks that have managed to reduce their customer onboarding from 2 weeks to a matter of, you know, 10-15 minutes, so 15 days to 15 minutes. We're also hearing about things like adverse media searches being significantly reduced in the time that they take. There's one example of a bank in North America that has reduced false positives by 95% and is making savings of about 15 million. What that translates is faster onboarding of customers again. So I hope these sort of illustrate the kind of things that organizations can do.
No, I think they do a great job, and you have more depth on those conversations. If you want to reach out to us later, we can certainly help you with some of those more positive examples of how customers are taking this to the next level. So, all right, let's wrap up on the data part, and we'll move into Q&A here in just a second. But let's take kind of to the next looking forward conversation. So, what are the controversies that we're looking at here, and Sarah, do you want to start off with the first one in terms of how this market's going to evolve? You and I talked about this a lot in terms of, you know, just a few years ago, we were looking at, you know, 5 to 10 vendors in this space. And what was that, just like 4 years ago, something like that?
And then, the numbers went up.
How many are you tracking now, Sarah?
Oh, I think overall there are around 60-70 vendors. You know, we're tracking a good proportion of those, but the thing is that there's a lot of there is some mergers and acquisition activity going on. You know, we know about, for example, Appian acquiring Jidoka not long ago, and the RPA vendors also no longer want to be one-trick ponies, so they are expanding either through developing their own additional capabilities, such as, you know, Blue Prism developing its intelligent document processing capabilities, and then we have some of them acquiring companies like UiPath acquired Process Gold and so on. So there's a lot of activity going on, and of course the bigger companies are now starting to take note. SAP some time ago made an acquisition in this space. Microsoft has just made a series of announcements as well. So it's actually changing. So it is evolving, it's changing. And I think the capability RPA will be here to stay, because it's something that every organization can use, but it is evolving quite fast.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's something you and your team are constantly updating the information you provide to clients, and I know it's no longer about just incrementally changing things. You're constantly having to change the landscape and actually show new landscapes of the vendor community.
Sure. Yeah.
So the second one here, Amara, I'm going to ask you this one. Would it make sense to deploy a robot for every employee? I know we've talked about that. Will it benefit, hurt the automation journey?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an interesting one because what we're seeing is enterprises, at least some of them, have started experimenting with this vision of robot for every employee. And what we see is that this is more like a bet that they have put in terms of the investments that they have made in this direction. They are hoping to get benefits out of it in terms of greater employee experience, employee productivity, and those benefits coming in over a course of time, not necessarily a short-term period. That's why it kind of comes under one of the themes that we are really investigating on, and we believe that in the next 12 to 18 months period, we will get more information around what kind of benefits enterprises have been able to realize from their investments in this direction. Now, it could very well benefit them in terms of improved employee engagement, employee productivity, and also create a culture that kind of really embraces innovation. Or it could also hurt the journey, and in terms of this investments not bearing the kind of fruits that they had in mind when they made the investment.
Okay, great. And the last one we have here, and I'll start this one and let you guys chime in on this: the robot shoring, reduce the need for outsourcing and offshoring. So I think there is going to be an impact on the overall services organization, whether it be through a shared services or through an outside provider. I think there will be an impact here. So we don't see like a wholesale, hey, the robots are coming and they're going to take over everybody's job, but they will have an impact in some of the very transactional workforces. And if some of those things happen to be offshore or outsourced, those may be the ones that we see the most impact toward the actual overall human robot equation, if you will, or the software that was applied there. So I think robot shoring is something we're going to pay a bunch of attention to as we go forward here. And I don't know if will the enterprises prefer to work with an automation platform provider versus a traditional providers. We'll have to see, but there's certainly going to be a kind of a tug of war there. And Sarah, I don't know if you see that tug of war right now or not.
Yes, yes, definitely, to some extent, absolutely, yes. I think what we'll see is that robot shoring will chip away at some of the market, but the service providers will also do their own thing, in that they will develop more automation capabilities. They will offer more automated services, and so yes, that will just continue in that way.
Yeah, so we'll continue to look at that as a team, not only with Sarah's team, but also across the rest of our research organization. So, all right, so that concludes the actual presentation. We want to open up to questions, and I've got a whole bunch of them lined up here. I'm gonna take a few. Sarah, if you want to grab a few, certainly take your choices on there. The first one I'm gonna do is, how do you think COVID-19 will impact the automation journey of various enterprises? And so the good news is we actually have, I'm going to sound like we're promoting a future webinar here, which I am, and if Peter can put the link to that in the chat there, we actually are going to be talking about that probably in about a 10-day period. I think it's the 4th is we have that webinar set up for, and there's a link there you can register for that. We want to talk about the impact of what we're seeing here beyond the hand sanitizer moment. So I think we all know we should be using hand sanitizer and some of the basics there, but we want to get beyond that. What does that mean for organizations? So hopefully you can join us there. To answer your question directly in this context, I think it will drive more people to automation as we look for, hey, how do we, find those areas that we don't have to be so labor intensive? There will be some, once we get past the panic part of the cycle, there will be opportunities for people to look at it and say, hey, we need to have more redundancy. We need to have more documentation of our processes. And that automatically leads to a level of potential opportunities here for the automation dialogue.
There's one I can take, Michael, which is the improvement in operation metrics of Pinnacle Enterprise in respect to others. Is it due to the higher number of implementations only? No, that definitely helps, because the more you scale, the more benefits you can achieve, because you learn and you improve the way that you implement, as well as, of course, multiply the benefits. But it's the whole approach that Pinnacle Enterprises are taking, this kind of, where they have reviewed their processes, they have visualized what they might look like in future, they have optimized their processes before automating them, the way that they've gone about working with the rest of the enterprise, bringing people on board, helping them understand the benefits. So it's the whole approach towards adopting automation and implementing it on a large scale that is helping with that.
Okay. There's another question here. What kind of work is done in process mining?
Yeah.
Mara or Sarah, do you want to talk to either one of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just about to get to that question. And so we see 3 broad level use cases being targeted using process mining technologies. The first use case is around process discovery, or discovering the process models of the various business processes in the organization, and the way some of these process mining technologies work is kind of heavily focused on leveraging the logs from the IT systems. So it's really about leveraging those logs to discover the business processes and the process models. The second use case is around process conformance, and that is more to do with how the actual business processes, the discovered processes, kind of align to the ideal business process as defined by the organization, and if there are gaps, where those gaps are. And this kind of naturally extends to the third use case of process mining, which is around providing process intelligence and analytics around what are the ways in which those gaps could be overcome, or just providing more information around the gaps or automation opportunities or optimization opportunities, how the processes are being run in XYZ geography versus some other geography, and kind of identifying why it is taking more time in some other geography as compared to let's say US, and kind of getting to the bottom of it, or root cause analysis around those gaps, or just providing a lot more analytics and insights around how it can be done in a better way. And this is where we see a lot of process mining technology vendors kind of investing heavily in terms of providing more interesting and useful insights to the businesses. And the way they are doing it is also by leveraging artificial intelligence to do more predictive and prescriptive analytics.
All right, fantastic. All right, so let's wrap up right now. And what I want to do is point to an offer that we have here, and this is for enterprises, those that are buyers of services. And I've got a number of questions here in the that you've already submitted, and we'll certainly try to answer those. But if you've got a question, you want to set up a briefing with Sarah or Amar or any of the analysts on their teams, happy to get that set up. You can reach out to us in 3 ways. One is there's a link in the chat room right now. You can click on that, and that'll take you to a landing page to make that request. You can email Sarah or Amar or myself on the emails on the next slide here, or you can, at the end, there will be a post-webinar survey. You can click the box there, and that'll also trigger a response to us to reach out to you. So happy to do so. Wanted to thank you for your attendance today, and this is an exciting topic. I am sure we will be doing this study again in either later this year or early next year, and I can't wait to see the results and see how we've improved. But don't wait till then. If you have questions, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help.
Thank you to Michael, Sarah, and Amar, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Again, you will receive a follow-up email within 1 to 2 business days with a link to download the presentation slides, along with accessing the on-demand playback of today's live session. On behalf of Everest Group and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.